David Park had been setting motion sensor traps in the Olympic Peninsula for 3 years, and in that time he'd captured footage of everything from elusive pine martens to the occasional confused hiker who'd wandered off the designated trails. But checking trap number 7 on a foggy Tuesday morning, he definitely hadn't expected to find a terrified alien woman tangled in the equipment like some kind of interdimensional woodland sprite. "Oh, hell," David muttered, nearly dropping his data collection tablet as he stared at the figure caught in his carefully positioned camera trap. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with skin that seemed to shift between pale green and silver depending on the angle of the filtered sunlight. Her ears swept back from her head in elegant points that would have made fantasy artists weep with envy, and her large eyes held an intelligence that was both desperate and calculating. She was also injured, bleeding from several cuts where she'd struggled against the restraining mesh, and looked like she hadn't eaten a decent meal in weeks. "Easy there," David said softly, the same tone he'd use with a frightened deer. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She curled into a defensive ball and began speaking rapidly in a language that sounded like wine through silver bells, punctuated by what were clearly pleas or apologies. Her skin had shifted to a deep, mottled brown that David's biologist brain recognized as stress coloration. Okay, David said, setting down his tablet and raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "Let's just calm down for a minute here." He'd dealt with enough trapped animals to know that panic was the enemy of successful rescue. The woman, alien, he corrected himself, though the distinction felt academic when faced with someone so obviously terrified, was caught in a tangle of sensor wires and mesh that would only get worse if she kept struggling. "Look," David said, pulling out his multi-tool, "I'm going to cut you free, but you need to stop moving or you're going to hurt yourself worse." The woman went very still at the sight of the tool, her skin shifting to what David was starting to recognize as a fear response. She said something that sounded like a question, her voice small and broken. "I don't understand you," David admitted, "but I'm guessing you're asking if I'm going to hurt you." "The answer is no. I'm a wildlife biologist, not, whatever you're afraid I am." He began carefully cutting through the mesh, noting the way she flinched every time the metal tool came near her skin. Up close, he could see that her injuries weren't just from the trap. She had older scars, surgical-looking marks that spoke of medical procedures that hadn't been performed with her comfort in mind. "Jesus," David breathed, recognizing the precise, clinical nature of the scarring. "What did they do to you?" The woman's eyes widened at his tone, and for the first time, her skin shifted to a cautious yellow-green that suggested something other than pure terror. She said something that sounded like a name, Nissa, while pointing to herself. "Nissa," David repeated, and was rewarded with a small nod. "I'm David. And I'm going to get you out of this mess, okay?" The process of freeing her took 20 minutes of careful cutting and gentle maneuvering. Nissa remained perfectly still throughout, watching David's every move with the hypervigilant attention of someone who had learned that survival depended on reading human intentions correctly. When the last wire fell away, she immediately scrambled backward, putting distance between them while staying low to the ground. David sat back on his heels, giving her space. "There you go. Free as a bird." Nissa's response was to stare at him with obvious confusion, as if his behavior didn't match any pattern she'd learned to expect from humans. She said something that sounded like a question, her head tilted in a gesture so human-like that David felt a pang of sympathy. "You're wondering why I'm not calling someone, aren't you?" David said, more to himself than to her. "Or trying to capture you again, or I don't know, whatever you're expecting me to do." He pulled a water bottle and energy bar from his pack, setting them on the ground between them. "The truth is, I have no idea what's going on here. I'm just a guy who studies forest animals and tries to make sure they don't go extinct. Finding an injured person, alien person, in my equipment pretty much falls outside my normal job description." Nissa's eyes fixed on the food and water with an intensity that spoke of genuine hunger. But she didn't move toward them, apparently still trying to figure out what kind of trap this might be. "It's not poisoned or anything," David said gently. Though I suppose you have no reason to trust me on that. Tell you what, he opened a second water bottle and took a drink, then broke off a piece of his own energy bar and ate it. See? Safe. This simple demonstration seemed to break through Nissa's paralysis. She crept forward, snatched the offered food and water, and retreated to a safe distance to consume them. David noted the way she ate, quickly and efficiently, like someone who wasn't sure when her next meal might come. How long have you been out here? David asked, though he didn't expect an answer she could give him. To his surprise, Nissa held up 3 fingers, then made a gesture that might have indicated months or seasons. Her skin had settled into a cautious blue-green that suggested she was starting to believe he might not be an immediate threat. 3 months, David interpreted. Living rough in the woods, probably scavenging, staying away from people. He paused, studying her scars again. Running from someone who did things to you that you never consented to. Nissa's reaction to that statement was immediate and telling. Her skin flashed to deep red, and she said something that sounded like it might have been profanity in her musical language. Yeah, David said quietly, I figured as much. He stood up slowly, noting how she tensed but didn't bolt. Look, Nissa, I don't know what your situation is, but I can see you're hurt and scared and probably haven't had a decent night's sleep in months. My research station is about half a mile from here. It's isolated, no one else around, and it's got food, medical supplies, and a warm place to sleep. Nissa stared at him, her skin cycling through colors that David was beginning to interpret as rapid emotional processing. I'm not going to force you, David continued. And I'm not going to call anyone or report this or do anything that might put you back in the hands of whoever you're running from. I'm just offering help, no strings attached. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of wind through the evergreens. Then Nissa spoke a single word that needed no translation, why? David considered his answer carefully. Because 3 months ago, someone hurt you badly enough that you'd rather live alone in the wilderness than risk meeting another human. And because I've spent my entire career studying creatures who just want to survive in peace without being bothered. He shouldered his pack and gestured toward the trail. Sometimes the right thing to do is just leave someone alone. But sometimes it's offering them a safe place to heal. Nissa watched him for another long moment, then slowly got to her feet. Her skin had settled into a soft, uncertain green that David chose to interpret as cautious hope. Okay, she said in accented but clear English. Okay, David. I trust you. Little bit. It was a start. 2 weeks into what David had started thinking of as the most unusual research partnership of his career, he was beginning to understand that Nissa's trust came in very small, carefully measured doses. She'd accepted his offer of shelter but insisted on sleeping in the storage shed rather than the main cabin. She flinched away from any sudden movements, and she'd positioned herself so she could see all entrances to his research station at all times. The dear family by the eastern creek, Nissa said over their morning coffee, her English improving daily through their conversations, the young one is not well. Afraid feeling. Mother dear also worried. David looked up from his field notes. Afraid of what? Predators. Nissa shook her head, her ears twitching in what he'd learned was a gesture of concentration. Not predator fear. Human fear. Something, bad memory feeling. David frowned and pulled up his survey maps. There's nothing scheduled in that area. No logging, no development, no other research teams. He paused, studying Nissa's expression. Unless someone's been through there who shouldn't have been. Her skin immediately shifted to the mottled brown that indicated anxiety. Maybe people looking for escaped ones. It was the most direct reference she'd made to her situation since that first day. David had learned not to push for details, but he'd pieced together enough to understand that Nissa was one of several aliens who had been held in some kind of research facility and had managed to escape. The surgical scars, her terror of humans, her instinctive knowledge of how to hide and survive in the wilderness, it all painted a picture that made David's blood pressure spike every time he thought about it. The search teams, David said carefully. They're still looking. Always looking, Nissa confirmed quietly. Valuable specimens. Expensive to replace. Her voice turned bitter on the last words, and David noticed her hands clenching involuntarily. You're not a specimen, David said firmly. You're a person. A person who was hurt by people who had no right to hurt you. Nissa's skin flashed through several rapid color changes before settling on a soft blue that David had learned indicated surprise mixed with gratitude. David, your people, they do not all think this way. Some do, some don't, David admitted honestly. But the ones who think like me? We're working pretty hard to make sure the ones who think like them don't get to make decisions about how aliens are treated. This seemed to puzzle Nissa even more than his kindness had initially. But you are a scientist also. You study living things. I study living things to understand them and protect them, David clarified. Not to, what did they do to you, exactly? The question slipped out before he could stop himself, and he immediately regretted it as Nissa's skin flashed to deep red. But instead of retreating, she took a shaky breath and began to speak. My people, we feel emotions from others. Useful for understanding, for helping, for knowing when danger comes. Her voice was carefully controlled, clinical, as if she was reciting from a medical report. Scientists wanted to know how this works. Wanted to make humans who could do same thing. David felt sick. They experimented on you to try to give humans empathic abilities. Cut here, Nissa said, pointing to scars near her temples. And here. She indicated marks along her spine. Took pieces of brain tissue. Nerve samples. Said it was, cooperation. Said it would help our peoples understand each other. Jesus Christ, David breathed. That's not cooperation, that's butchery. How many of you were there? 17 when I arrived. 3 when I escaped. Nissa's skin had gone very pale, almost white. Others did not survive the procedures. David stood up abruptly, needing to pace off the anger that was building in his chest. And they're still out there. The people who did this to you. They're still operating. Still looking for escaped specimens, Nissa confirmed. Still promising cooperation and mutual benefit to new volunteers. We have to do something, David said, then caught himself. I have to do something. You don't owe anyone anything except staying safe. But Nissa was shaking her head. Cannot report. Will not believe alien over respected human scientists. And if they catch me. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. David could imagine what would happen to a recaptured test subject who had caused them 3 months of search expenses. There has to be some way, David said, but he knew she was right. Who would believe an illegal alien fugitive over credentialed researchers? Who would even care enough to investigate properly? Their conversation was interrupted by Nissa's sudden alertness, her skin flashing to alarmed yellow as she tilted her head in a listening pose. Someone comes, she whispered. 3 humans. Nervous feeling but determined. Looking for something. David grabbed his binoculars and scanned the tree-line. Sure enough, 3 figures in outdoor gear were making their way up the trail toward his station. They moved with the systematic precision of people conducting a search pattern. Shit, David muttered. Go to the shed, stay out of sight. But Nissa was already moving, her woodland survival instincts kicking in as she melted into the shadows like she'd been born to it. David took a deep breath and stepped outside to greet his unexpected visitors with what he hoped looked like normal scientific curiosity rather than panic. Afternoon, called the lead searcher, a woman in expensive hiking gear with the kind of tan that suggested she spent most of her time indoors under artificial lights. Dr. David Park. That's me, David replied carefully. Can I help you with something? Agent Sarah Chen, Department of Xenological Affairs, the woman said, producing credentials that looked official enough. We're investigating reports of unusual wildlife activity in this area. Specifically, sightings of what might be an unregistered alien life form. David's mouth went dry, but he managed to keep his expression neutral. I haven't seen any aliens. Just the usual forest animals, deer, birds, the occasional bear. Of course, Agent Chen said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But you have been conducting wildlife surveys in this area for several years. Surely someone with your expertise would notice anything unusual. Depends on what you mean by unusual, David said. I've seen albino raccoons and a two-headed snake, if that's the kind of unusual you're looking for. One of Chen's companions stepped forward. We have reason to believe that an escaped research subject may be hiding in this area. Potentially dangerous, definitely in need of medical attention. If you've seen anything or anyone that doesn't belong. David felt a surge of anger at the casual way they referred to Nissa as a research subject, but he forced himself to maintain his facade. Haven't seen anything like that. Though I have to say, if someone was hurt and needed medical attention, I'd probably try to help them rather than turning them over to people who might hurt them more. Agent Chen's smile became strained. Of course, Dr. Park. We appreciate your cooperation. Here's my card. If you do happen to notice anything unusual, please don't hesitate to call. After they left, David waited a full hour before calling for Nissa. She emerged from wherever she'd been hiding with her skin still showing the mottled patterns of extreme stress. They know I am here, she said quietly. They suspect, David corrected. But they don't know for sure. We just have to be more careful. Nissa looked at him with an expression of profound sadness. David, maybe I should go. Far away. Keep you safe from this trouble. No, David said, surprising himself with the vehemence of his response. Running didn't work before, it won't work now. They'll just keep looking until they find you. He paused, struck by a sudden realization. But maybe there's another way to handle this. What way? David smiled grimly. You said they're still recruiting new volunteers with promises of cooperation and mutual benefit? Nissa nodded warily. Well then, David said, maybe it's time someone with actual scientific credentials took a closer look at their operation. From the inside. The plan had seemed more reasonable when David first proposed it. 3 weeks later, sitting in his truck outside the Meridian Research Institute with a hidden camera in his jacket and Nissa monitoring the situation from their emergency fallback position, he was having serious doubts about his investigative abilities. You don't have to do this, Nissa said through their concealed communication device, her voice tight with worry. Too dangerous. If they realize who you are. They won't, David replied quietly, watching the sleek building that housed what looked like a perfectly legitimate medical research facility. I'm just Dr. David Park, wildlife biologist. The plan had seemed more reasonable when David first proposed it. 3 weeks later, sitting in his truck outside the Meridian Research Institute with a hidden camera in his jacket and Nissa monitoring the situation from their emergency fallback position, he was having serious doubts about his investigative abilities. You don't have to do this, Nissa said through their concealed communication device, her voice tight with worry. Too dangerous. If they realize who you are. They won't, David replied quietly, watching the sleek building that housed what looked like a perfectly legitimate medical research facility. I'm just Dr. David Park, wildlife biologist, interested in contributing to interspecies cooperation studies. My credentials check out, my research background is real, and I've been careful not to leave any connection between us. What he didn't mention was that leaving Nissa alone for extended periods while he conducted reconnaissance had become increasingly difficult for reasons that had nothing to do with her safety. Over the past month, their relationship had evolved from protector and protected into something that felt remarkably like a genuine partnership. She'd become invaluable to his wildlife research, her empathic abilities providing insights into animal behavior that complemented his scientific methodology perfectly. More than that, she'd become the person he most looked forward to talking with each day, whose opinions he valued, whose company made his isolated research station feel like home rather than just a workplace. "David," Nissa's voice came through the communicator again, softer now. "I can feel your emotional state from here. You are very worried. But also determined. And something else, something warm feeling." David smiled despite his nerves. Nissa's empathic abilities had grown stronger in the weeks since her physical recovery, and she'd begun picking up his emotions even at a distance. It was both convenient for covert operations and thoroughly inconvenient for maintaining any kind of emotional privacy. "Just focus on staying safe," David said. "If anything goes wrong, stick to the plan. Get to the backup site and contact the people I told you about." "David," the warm feeling, "it is about me, yes?" David paused with his hand on the truck door. "Of all the times for this conversation to happen. Nissa, we need to talk about a lot of things when this is over. Right now I need you to focus on the mission." "Right. Mission focus. But David?" Her voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. "When this is over, I would like to talk about warm feelings too." The Meridian Research Institute's lobby was a masterpiece of reassuring medical aesthetics. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, motivational posters about the benefits of interspecies cooperation. David announced himself to the receptionist and was escorted to a conference room where Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the facilities director, waited with a presentation that was clearly designed to impress potential collaborators. "Dr. Park, I'm so pleased you contacted us," Dr. Martinez said, her smile professionally warm. "Your background in xenobiology makes you exactly the kind of researcher we hope to partner with." "I've been following the interspecies cooperation studies with great interest," David replied, settling into his role as an enthusiastic scientist. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about the practical applications. How exactly do you envision this research benefiting both species?" "Excellent question," Dr. Martinez said, launching into a presentation that managed to make human neural modification experiments sound like humanitarian outreach. "Our research focuses on understanding the biological basis of enhanced empathic abilities in certain alien species, with the goal of developing therapeutic applications for humans with autism, PTSD, and other conditions affecting emotional processing." David nodded appreciatively while his hidden camera recorded every slide. "And your test subjects, I'm sorry, your volunteer participants, they're comfortable with the level of medical intervention required?" "Absolutely," Dr. Martinez assured him. "All participants are fully informed volunteers who understand that advancing interspecies medical knowledge requires some degree of invasive procedures. We provide excellent care and compensation for their time." "I'd love to meet some of the participants," David said casually. "Get their perspective on the program, you know." Dr. Martinez's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid our participants are in a sensitive phase of treatment right now. But I can show you our facilities and introduce you to some of our research staff." The tour that followed was a masterclass in presenting medical horror as scientific progress. Clean, well-lit laboratories filled with equipment that looked impressive to lay people but would have horrified any medical professional with actual ethics training. Research notes that described subjects, rather than patients, procedures that had clearly been conducted without proper anesthesia, and recovery rooms that looked more like prison cells than medical facilities. "This is where our participants rest between procedures," Dr. Martinez explained, showing David a room that contained what were clearly restraint systems disguised as medical equipment. "We found that the enhanced empathic abilities can make recovery emotionally overwhelming, so we provide a controlled environment." David managed to maintain his interested expression while his stomach churned. "I imagine the participants appreciate having such careful monitoring." "Oh yes, they're very grateful. Though of course, the language barrier can sometimes make communication challenging." "You don't have translators working with them?" "We have some translation technology, but honestly, for the level of medical intervention required, verbal communication isn't always necessary. The participants understand that they're contributing to something important." David's communication device chose that moment to buzz with what he recognized as Nissa's emergency signal. Someone was approaching their fallback position. "Excuse me," David said, checking his phone with what he hoped looked like casual professionalism. "I should probably head back. I have a conference call scheduled with some colleagues." "Of course," Dr. Martinez said. "But before you go, I wanted to mention that we're always looking for qualified researchers to join our program on a more permanent basis. Someone with your background would be perfect for our field acquisition team." "Field acquisition?" "We occasionally need to locate participants who have wandered away from the facility," Dr. Martinez explained with the same pleasant tone she'd used to describe experimental surgery. "Medical facilities can be stressful for some species, and sometimes participants need gentle encouragement to return for continued treatment." David felt ice form in his stomach. "I see. Well, I'll definitely consider all the opportunities you've presented." The drive back to their emergency meeting point felt like the longest 20 minutes of David's life. He found Nissa exactly where she was supposed to be, hidden in a maintenance shed behind an abandoned ranger station, but her skin was cycling rapidly through stress colors and her breathing was shallow. "They found our research station," she said without preamble. "Searched everything. Took your equipment, your research notes, everything." David felt the bottom drop out of his world. "Did they find any evidence that you were there?" "Not evidence they would recognize," Nissa said. "But David, they will keep looking. And now they know someone has been helping escaped specimens." "Subjects," David corrected grimly. "That's what they call you. Subjects. Like your lab rats instead of people." Nissa's skin flashed to angry red. "What did you learn?" David pulled out the hidden camera and began uploading the footage to a secure server. "Enough to shut them down, if we can get this information to the right people. But Nissa, we can't go back to the station. They'll be watching it now. Where do we go?" David looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that somewhere in the past month, the terrified fugitive he'd found in his trap had become the most important person in his life. The thought of her being recaptured, of her ending up back in those sterile cells, made his chest tighten with something approaching panic. "Anywhere you want," he said. "As far away as we need to go. Together." Nissa's empathic abilities made verbal confirmation unnecessary. Her skin shifted to that warm, hopeful blue-green, and she stepped closer to him. "David, the warm feeling I sense from you, it is the same." 6 months after their dramatic escape from the Pacific Northwest, David woke up in their small cabin outside Missoula, Montana, to find Nissa sitting by the window with her laptop, her skin showing the satisfied golden glow that had become his favorite sight in the world. "The last facility just closed," she announced, turning to smile at him with an expression of fierce joy. "Portland, Seattle, and now Denver. All shut down. All staff arrested. All remaining subjects transferred to legitimate medical facilities for actual treatment." David sat up, instantly awake. "The Denver facility too? I thought they were fighting the charges." Dr. Martinez decided to cooperate with investigators in exchange for reduced sentencing, Nissa said, her skin shifting to amused yellow-green. Apparently facing multiple counts of medical torture and alien trafficking charges motivated her to find her conscience. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of clandestine journalism, leaked documents, and carefully coordinated law enforcement raids. David's footage from the Meridian Institute had been the catalyst, but Nissa's detailed testimony and medical records had provided the evidence needed to build cases against the entire network of illegal research facilities. "How many survivors total?" David asked, pulling on his clothes and moving to look over her shoulder at the news reports. 43 confirmed survivors across all facilities, Nissa replied, leaning back against him in a gesture that had become natural over the months they'd spent in hiding together. "All receiving proper medical care now. All with full legal protections and citizenship pathways if they want them." David wrapped his arms around her, marveling at how right this felt. Their relationship had developed gradually during the stress and uncertainty of their fugitive months. Shared danger evolving into shared trust, mutual protection becoming genuine partnership, and finally the acknowledgement that what they'd built together was worth preserving regardless of external circumstances. Any word from the others? The ones who escaped with you? Nissa's expression grew soft with emotion. Keth sent a message through our secure channel. He is working with refugee assistance programs now, helping newly arrived aliens navigate human legal systems. And Vera, she has started a support group for survivors of medical trauma. They're both okay. More than okay. Healing. Contributing. Living instead of just surviving. Nissa turned in his arms to face him directly. Like us. Their cabin was small but comfortable, purchased under carefully constructed false identities with money from the book deal David had negotiated for their story. The proceeds from Subjects No More. An investigation into illegal alien experimentation had provided enough financial security to start over somewhere safe, and the ongoing consulting work with legitimate xenobiological research programs gave their new life both purpose and legal legitimacy. Dr. Sarah Martinez called yesterday, David said, referring to the lead investigator who had taken over the interspecies cooperation program after the scandals broke. The University of Montana wants to offer us both positions in their new ethical xenobiology department. Nissa's eyebrows rose. Both of us? You'd be the first alien to hold a faculty position at a human university, David explained. Co-director of interspecies communication studies, with full tenure track and research budget. They specifically want your empathic abilities to guide ethical research protocols. And you? Department head, if I want it. Full research support, graduate students, the whole academic package. David paused, studying her expression. The question is whether that's what we want, or if we prefer staying independent. Nissa was quiet for a long moment, her skin cycling through thoughtful colors. What do you want, David? I want to be where you are, David said honestly. Whether that's a university lab, a cabin in the woods, or a research station on some alien world I've never heard of. The work is important, but it's not as important as what we've built together. Her empathic abilities made verbal confirmation of his sincerity unnecessary, but Nissa's skin glowed with warm gold anyway. I feel the same way. But David. I think I would like to try the university position. Yeah. I spent so long running from humans who wanted to study me, Nissa explained, that I forgot there were humans who might want to learn from me instead. Working with students, helping establish ethical protocols, making sure no one else has to experience what I experienced. It feels like the right kind of experiment to participate in. David grinned and kissed her forehead. Dr. Nissa has a nice ring to it. Dr. and Dr. Park Nissa, she corrected, and David's heart did something complicated in his chest. Are you proposing to me? I am suggesting that our partnership deserves official recognition, Nissa said with dignity only slightly undermined by the playful sparkle in her large eyes. Though I should warn you that Zephyri marriage traditions involve extensive empathic bonding that will make hiding emotions from each other essentially impossible. Considering that you already know everything I'm feeling most of the time anyway, I think I can handle that, David replied. Though I should probably warn you that human marriage traditions involve extensive paperwork and at least one embarrassing party where our families argue about politics. I am willing to risk the paperwork, Nissa said solemnly. And I look forward to meeting your family, even if they argue about politics. David's response was interrupted by a knock at their door, 3 short taps followed by 2 long ones, the pattern they'd established with their contact network. Nissa's skin immediately shifted to alert yellow, but she relaxed when her empathic senses identified the visitor. Sarah Martinez, she said. Nervous, excited feeling. Good news, I think. David opened the door to find the federal prosecutor who had become their primary contact with law enforcement, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the kind of smile that suggested significant legal developments. Congratulations, Agent Martinez said, inviting herself in with the familiarity of someone who had worked closely with them for months. The last appeals were rejected this morning. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the other Dr. Martinez, the evil one, got 15 years in federal prison. The entire network is officially dismantled. It's over. David asked, hardly daring to believe it. It's over, Agent Martinez confirmed. You're both free to resume your real identities whenever you're ready. Though I have to say, the work you've done under your assumed names has been pretty impressive. The University of Montana's offer is legitimate, by the way, they know exactly who you are and they want you anyway. Nissa's skin had shifted to brilliant gold, and David could feel her emotions through their growing empathic connection, joy, relief, hope, and underneath it all, a deep sense of safety that she hadn't felt since before her capture years ago. There is one more thing, Agent Martinez continued, producing an official-looking document from her briefcase. Presidential Commendation for Contributions to Civil Rights and Interspecies Relations. Both of you. Ceremony next month in Washington if you're interested. David looked at Nissa, who was practically glowing with pride and happiness. What do you think? Ready to be official heroes? I think, Nissa said, taking his hand and letting her empathic abilities share the full depth of her contentment with their life together, that the best experiments are the ones where everyone involved chooses to participate freely. And gets to publish the results, David added, grinning. And gets to build a life with their research partner, Nissa concluded, her skin settling into the warm, steady blue-green that David had learned meant home, safety, and love. Outside their window, Montana stretched toward the horizon in all directions, full of possibilities and new experiments in living that they would explore together. The fugitive phase of their relationship was over, but the partnership they'd built while running for their lives had proven strong enough to become the foundation for whatever came next. David had accidentally caught a fugitive in his wildlife trap, but what he'd actually discovered was the person who would help him understand that the most important research of his life wouldn't be about animals at all, it would be about building a future where different species could work together as equals, partners, and sometimes, if they were very lucky, family. So, David said, settling beside Nissa to watch the sunrise paint the mountains gold, ready to start our next experiment? With you? Nissa replied, her empathic abilities making words almost unnecessary but her smile making them worthwhile anyway. I am ready for anything.